Good morning and welcome to the first meeting of the Legislative Commission of the 2025-2026 interim period. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to begin our meeting with our roll call. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Senator Nguyen.
Here.
Senator Scheibel.
Here.
Senator Titus.
Here.
Assemblymember Bacchus. Assemblymember Hafen.
Here.
Assemblymember Hansen.
Here.
Assemblymember Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblymember Watts.
Here.
Assemblymember Yeager.
Here.
And Chair Cannizzaro.
And I am here. We do have 4 members attending in the legislative building in Carson City and 8 members here with us in the legislative office building in Las Vegas. So we do have a quorum present. And before we begin, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items before we get started. For any of you who are wishing to testify, please make sure that you state and spell your name for the record before testifying. If anyone would like to receive a copy of the Commission's agenda, minutes, or reports, you may be added to our mailing list by following the links on the legislature's website or by providing information to our staff. Contact information for staff is also listed on the legislature's website. In addition, we accept written comments, which may be emailed or mailed before, during, or after the meeting. The information regarding where to send written comments is also on the website and listed on the agenda for this meeting. That will bring us to item number 2 on our agenda, which is our first period of public comment. This particular public comment will begin here in Las Vegas, then go to Carson City, then move over to our phone lines. For those of you who are here to give public comment, please make sure that you state and spell your name again for the record. We will be limiting public comment to 2 minutes per person, and any additional comments you have can always be submitted in writing after or during the meeting. And so we will have a second period of public comment. If those of you wish to testify in that second period of public comment, we welcome you to do that as well. And if you are going to give testimony, please make sure that in whatever location you are, you go ahead and sign in on the clipboard by the door before you leave or when you come in. I don't see anyone approaching the tables in Las Vegas, so we will go to Carson City. Do we have anyone wishing to give public comment in Carson City?
There's none.
All right, we don't have anybody here in Vegas or in Carson City, so we will move on over to our phone lines. AVH, if you could let us know if there's anyone wishing to give public comment over the phone.
Thank you, Chair. The line is open and working. We have no callers at this time.
Okay, then we will go ahead and move from item number 2 on our agenda, that first period of public comment. As a reminder, we will have a second period of public comment at the end of the meeting for anyone who missed that first portion. And we will move on to item number 3, which is our election of chair and vice chair of the Legislative Commission. Members, I would note that you do have a copy of Joint Rule number 11 at your desk today. Subsection 6 of Joint Rule 11 provides that the chair shall be selected at the first meeting of each newly formed Legislative Commission and shall serve until his or her successor is appointed following the formation of the next Legislative Commission. At this point in time, I would entertain a motion
Madam
to
Chair,
nominate
Madam Chair, Senator Titus here.
Yes,
before you.
Senator Titus, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like just a moment in time to make a comment and statement before we open up any nominations or move forward with this process.
Is this regarding, well, I guess I'll go ahead and give you the leeway to go ahead and make that comment. It might be more appropriate on discussion of the motion.
No, thank you. I think before we do that, just a comment before we start the Leg Commission formally, and I appreciate that the tolerance and the opportunity to address my fellow commission members and fellow Nevadans. So as we convene our first meeting in the 25-27 interim, I've got to address the troubling events that transpired in the final moments of the 83rd legislative session. What should have been a collaborative close to a productive and cordial session was marred by the majority party's 11th hour actions, which undermined, in my opinion, the integrity of our legislative process. In the final 30 minutes before the constitutional midnight deadline, the majority party introduced Senate Concurrent Resolution 8 to shift the Legislative Commission membership from a balanced 3-3 split in each house to a 4-2 majority in their favor. The resolution was read in the Assembly before the Senate vote was even finalized at 11:51, a procedural irregularity that denied minority memberships adequate review and deliberation. In fact, according to the Assembly, they never received a copy of the resolution before the vote. This lack of transparency is unacceptable in a body committed to fairness that legislates for an even partisan state. Senate Resolution 9's vote occurred at 12:18 on June 3rd, 18 minutes after the deadline set by Article 4, Section 2 of the Nevada Constitution. Legal precedent suggests that actions taken after midnight are void unless enrolled prior to midnight, which SR 9 was not. Consequently, the existing 3-3 membership balance should remain. Most alarmingly, it's our opinion the governor, lieutenant governor, was locked out of Senate chambers, preventing him from fulfilling his constitutional duty. This action raises serious questions under the legality of the Senate's actions during that period. Under Mason's rules, which governs our proceedings, such actions violate the principle of perfect equality among members and undermines the democratic process. Last-minute amendments left no time for the Legislative Council Bureau to process the bill and print it, resulting in its failure, never making it to the Senate chambers prior to midnight. Safe neighborhoods are non-negotiable, and the majority party actions prioritize political gains over public safety. Why we
And
believe,
Senator,
I'm going to close. I'm going to close, please.
For you to wrap up your comments,
I am, thank
considering
you.
that this is
I will wrap them up.
inappropriate for the item that we are on.
Well, this is prior to the actual motions. Why we believe there is legal standing to challenge SR 9 in court and win. The judiciary is unlikely to intervene in internal legislative process and procedures. Therefore, we will prosecute our case in the public opinion. However, it is my opinion that we, the 4 of us that are Republicans on this body, are honored to serve on this commission. We will cooperate with the majority party and looking forward to participate in the future motions and future leadership. Thank you all for your tolerance.
And I will remind members of this body that while we are on items on our agenda, it is appropriate for us to have discussions about those particular items. This particular item, item number 3 on our agenda, is the election of chair and vice chair of the Legislative Commission. It is inappropriate for us to be having, I guess, what I would characterize as some sort of legal debate in the Legislative Commission regarding the formation of Legislative Commission, as that is more properly appropriate for any sort of legal challenge that may or may not exist. As for the number of allegations, I will also recognize and remind this body that we have rules of decorum and rules against infringing upon or calling out other members of this commission. And I would remind this body that those do exist for the members who serve on this commission at all times. To the extent that there are allegations made today regarding the passage of Senate resolutions at the end of the legislative session, or allegations, which frankly, I am going to take a moment just to address, that somehow the Lieutenant Governor was locked out of the Senate, that is 100% untrue. And I don't appreciate those sort of allegations being brought to a Legislative Commission meeting. So I am going to go back to item number 3, which properly allows us to talk about the election of chair and vice chair of the Legislative Commission. I would be open to, again, a motion to nominate a chair for the Legislative Commission. And I'm going to go to Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your service as chair during this past interim. It's my intention to make 2 motions, one for each position. So I would like to make a motion to elect Assemblymember Howdigi as chair of the Legislative Commission.
I'd move to second.
I do have a motion from Assemblymember Watts to nominate Assemblymember Howdigi for chair of the Legislative Commission, and I have a second from Assemblymember Backus. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Madam Chair, on your election. I now will accept a motion to nominate a vice chair for the Legislative Commission, and I will again go to Assemblymember Waltz.
Thank you very much. I would move to elect Speaker Yeager as Vice Chair of the Legislative Commission.
Madam Chair, I'd second that.
So I do have a motion to nominate Speaker Yeager as Vice Chair of the Legislative Commission from Assemblymember Watts. I have a second from Assemblymember Backus. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Speaker, on your election to as Vice Chair. Seeing that we do have now a new chair and vice chair for our legislative commission. I am again going to extend my congratulations and just honored to serve with both of you here on the legislative commission. I am going to turn the duties then of chair over to our new chair, Chair Howdigi, and turn it over to you to take over the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Senate Majority Leader and Speaker and members of the committee. I'm looking forward to working alongside everyone during this next interim as chair of Legislative Commission. With that, members, I would like to keep moving through our agenda, and I would like to move over to item number 4, which is approval of our draft minutes for the Legislative Commission meeting held on December 19th, 2024. These draft minutes are also available on the legislature's website. I will first ask if there's any discussion on these minutes. Okay, not seeing any down in Las Vegas and no hands raised in Carson City. I would look for a motion to approve the minutes of the Legislative Commission's December 19th meeting.
So moved.
Okay, I have a first from Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro, a second from Speaker Yeager. Those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The minutes for the December 19th meeting of the Legislative Commission have been approved. Okay, that takes us to item number 5 on our agenda, which is our review of the administrative regulations. Our Legislative Counsel, Asher Killian, is here with us today in Las Vegas to assist us with this item. There are 18 regulations that were submitted for approval pursuant to NRS 233B.067. These regulations are all contained in the notebook provided to the members and posted on the legislature's website under the tab for this meeting, which you will find by hitting the View Events button in the upper right corner of the legislature's website homepage. There is also a public copy of the notebook on the sign-in table at each end of the video conference. At this time, I will ask commission members if there are any regulations to be held for further discussion. I have received a list from the members, so I will go through the list that I have first, and then members, if there are any other regulations that you would like to pull in addition, please speak up. The first regulation I have is R139-23. The second regulation, R057-24. The third regulation, R068-24, followed by R077-24, R109-24, and finally R130-24. Commission members, are there any regulations in addition that you would like held for discussion? Okay, I do not see any additional regulations to be pulled at this point. I would be looking for a motion to approve the remaining regulations under this item that were not pulled. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair. Oh.
Thank you. I have a first by Assemblymember Nguyen, a second by Speaker Yeager. Will those members in favor of the motion please signify by saying aye? Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, the motion is approved. Now let's get back to the regulations that have been pulled for further discussion. I will take those in order. And the first regulation I have that was pulled is R139-23. This regulation was requested by Assemblymember Skip Daly. Oh, Senator Skip Daly. Forward.
Is there someone coming forward down there?
Senator Daly, I was just going to ask you if there was anyone in Carson City.
Nope.
Hi, this is Rebecca Lindelow with DWSS. I have Angelique Washington on the line as well to answer any questions. She is our program specialist.
Thank you. And Senator Daly, did you want to proceed with your questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And real quick, just hopefully so I understand this a little bit better. It's not something I'm 100% familiar with, but I do have a couple of questions. So when I was reading through it in the new language in Section 1, and then also in my reading Section 3, Sub 3B, it seems to indicate that there's a formula, a relatively prescriptive formula on how you're making a determination on what the support level needs to be. Is it significantly different from what we had? Is this formula, how much flexibility is there? What are we changing with this new language as far as making those determinations?
Angelique, are you on the line?
This is broadcast. Angelique did not join the Zoom yet.
Let me jump in and answer that the best I can. This is specific to when we're looking at both of the parties' obligations. How we determine that obligation has not changed. What this is in regards to the difference between the obligee's obligation and the obligor's obligation, and whether the amount for the obligation would be a full or a half. So how they determine the obligation has not changed.
So this is just to try to figure the difference between the two parties, if you will, on who has to pay which amount. And I was just, and like I said, my unfamiliarity with some of this is perhaps prompting the question, because it seemed pretty prescriptive on how this gets done. And I understand the difference between the two obligees, right, the people that have to pay, and then making that split. But the formula or the way they do that is based on income and a variety of other issues. None of that has changed.
Correct.
Okay. And then in Section 4, Sub 1D, can you give me an explanation or a little bit of insight as to why we're making that change? It seems to be that it is adds a little more flexibility, but was just looking for some confirmation on what it is we're trying to get done there.
I'm sorry, can you give me that section again?
Section 4, Sub 1D.
Bear with me, please.
Here's the answer I had gotten right there, because they kind of want people to get off.
Were you able to find that section? You're muted. We can't hear you. We couldn't hear you.
Ms. Linslow, I believe you have your computer on mute. Ms. Linslow, we are still having trouble hearing you.
This is Stephanie with Broadcast. I'm just checking in. If you click that up caret next to your audio, you can switch the audio. It looks like it's switched to a phone, and I don't know if the phone has been muted. Chair, it looks like she's been disconnected, and I'm sure she'll disconnect or reconnect in a moment.
Senator Daly, if you're okay with it, I know we were waiting for another presenter from the agency to get on. Do you mind if we come back to this regulation, just in hopes of getting all agency representatives on the line and giving Ms. Linslow time to reconnect?
No, I have no objection to that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, members, we will come back to R057-24. Let's go ahead and move forward to R068-24. Do we have the Department of Public Safety here? It looks like I jumped ahead. That was R139-23 that we will be coming back to. We will go ahead and move to R057-24. Do we have the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association here? I believe we have questions for you from Senator Daly and Assemblymember Backus.
Yes, Madam Chair. Paul Anderson with the Maupin Cox and Lagoy law firm in Reno. I'm legal counsel for the NIAA.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I believe we have questions for you from Senator Daly and Assemblymember Backus. We can start with Senator Daly up north.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of questions, and I saw where verbal abuse is defined. I believe that's in section 8, sub 12D. And I don't know how you get around it or whatever else, but it seems fairly subjective. It sounds like it's the referee or whatever official is at the location or overseeing the event that gets to make that determination. Can you give a little explanation on what types of things might or might not be, the verbal abuse? Obviously, we want people to behave, but when is it going to cross that line, and what kind of training are the people going to get on how they're going to determine what's verbal abuse? And different personalities, different people, different refs, different interpretations, different events.
Well, Senator Daly, thank you for the question. Which section were you looking at exactly? I'm sorry.
Well, the definition for verbal abuse, I believe, is in section 8, subsection 12D.
12B defined assault. Is that what you're discussing?
12D.
Let me just try to answer your question.
Delta, where it says verbal abuse means aggressive, offensive, profane language that is directed at a person. And if I read the first part of it, it's the referee or the official at whatever event it is that's going to make that determination.
Correct, and either it would be either an official, an actual game or contest official that would make that determination, and or a school administrator at most likely the school where the event is taking place would make that determination. It's not going to be a determination that's going to be just made off the whim, for any particular comment, but. You need to understand, as you may already, that high school sports are education based, yet they've turned recently into events that where very aggressive language or profane language is being used. And that's what we're trying to prevent here. As far as training, our officials receive extensive training through their associations. And the NIAA as an association provides training to administrators, athletic directors, and whatnot on an annual basis, and school principals. So as I say, it's not going to be something where just some slight comment that may not necessarily fall within the definition would spur that sort of action. And there is, appeal ability for the individual to pursue also.
And I understand. I was just trying to get some clarity on that. I don't think you could make a definition that would cover everything that people are going to understand. And then you do subjectivity on the interpretation on who it is, what the particular words were, what type of event it was, how close they were. If you had a wrestling match and you're fairly close to the activity, there's a lot of different things that would go into this. And I was just trying to figure out what it is exactly that we don't want to get into the situation where, obscenity, I says, we'll know it when we see it, right? But that's kind of where we're at, sounds like to me.
Well, yeah, you're correct in a lot of ways. But I think we do know it when we see it at the high school level. And you're accurate also with respect to the nature of the event, the closeness of fans, for instance, to, an event, a football game is much different than, as you mentioned, a wrestling match or whatever. But there is an appeal process, and these can be brought, if somebody were ejected for comments, they can be brought to the attention of the executive director, and appeal rights pursued from there. So that's also in the regulation.
Okay. And my second question is in section 10, where you add the word. So I understand a coach, an official, administrator, faculty member who's involved, or a pupil who's involved, right? So those people are there, they have responsibility, there are things that came along with them participating is the rules. But when you add a spectator who participates in or attends the sanctioned sport shall not make defamatory statements. So I understand if you're in attendance, and that was the section we were just talking about on offensive, abusive language and all that. But if somebody makes a post, private person, on a social media site and says, hey, that ref was, no good so-and-so, et cetera, how is it that you're then going to then try to prohibit that spectator from attending an otherwise public event based on their free speech? I just don't see how Section 10 is ever going to get to a spectator in relation to the social media or activity outside the event. We're not there. We're not watching. There's no one's there. You're making a post. You're doing whatever you might do. Hell, they could go put a picket up or something, right? And say that guy was a no good so-and-so. And the way I read Section 10, you would be able to prohibit that person from participating based on his speech. How do you see that working? I don't see it working, but how do you see it?
Again, Senator Daly, the idea of this entire regulation is to attempt to bring back civility as best we can into the high school athletic arena. Not that it's not there, but there's times when it's not. And so, in this situation, the spectator typically would be a fan or a parent or somebody involved with a particular school. And we've always prohibited coaches, players, and whatnot from commenting in the media about officials. That's a fairly standard rule that you would see not only at the high school level across the country, but also with respect to colleges and whatnot. So again, I understand your concern. And how would we enforce it? Well, if it's on social media and it's well known, I think it could be enforced against a spectator, depending on the nature of the post and the criticism and that sort of thing. So that's
Well,
best I can do.
I understand how you can put it on a coach. I mean, you have an employment relationship with them, an official, an administrator, even a pupil. You can say, hey, look, this is part of what comes with you being, in a student at the school or participating in the event. But when you get to be a spectator, right? And I don't know how you would be able to enforce or prohibit me from coming to your event later. Were you going to have somebody checking everybody's post? Or are you going to have this parent ratting out another parent? I mean, how are you actually going to do this? And then how do you get past, I understand you want the civility. We want civility all across the board, but people still have free speech rights. We can disagree with what they're saying or how they go about it, and the civility of it all. We can disagree with all of that, but they still have those rights. I'm just not seeing how Section 10 works.
Well, again, the idea of the regulation is to bring that civility back to the high school athletic arena. And I mean, if there's something posted and that goes wild on the internet or whatnot, then I think it can be enforced, because if a particular spectator's attending games at a certain school, the administration there is going to know who that person is. With respect to the free speech rights, I certainly understand what you're saying, but again, we see no place as the NIA for somebody to verbally abuse, whether it's an official or a player or a coach or whoever that's participating in one of these events, publicly or at the particular event. And that's why we've included this here, because things have gotten much worse in the last few years. And one of the problems we do have as an association, and which could at some point really affect high school sports, is an inability to recruit and obtain and keep officials for our events because of the abuse they've been taking from spectators. So that's the purpose behind it.
And thank you, Madam Chair. That was my last question. I know other people have questions. So what I'm getting out of this, and whether I'm right or not, is that we're okay, trying to take away this person's First Amendment rights because we think we have a greater good. And I just disagree with that concept. People have that First Amendment, freedom of speech. If they were doing it at the event, I think that's different. But they're outside the event, and then you're going to try to say, we're going to preclude you from coming to this otherwise public event based on speech you made online. I just don't see how that stands legally, but I'll let other people ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daly. And we are going to come down to Assemblymember Backus, and then we will head back up north to Assemblymember Hanson. Assemblymember Backus.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I too, like Senator Daly, had some concerns over the regulation. And thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being with us today to kind of go over this. Mine's going to go in a different direction than the verbal abuse. I'm taking a look, and this is where it applies, but it applies throughout, is what's set forth in Section 3 and how that would apply. So, for example, in Section 8, in paragraph 1, you have basically a penalty that would apply. So it says if a team ... but basically the focus is going to be on the spectator. So if a spectator violates any provision of the NAC provisions 385B.802 to 385B.812 inclusive, or Section 3 of this regulation, the principal of the school or a designee thereof shall within 24 hours, becoming aware of the violation, prepare and submit to the executive director a written report concerning the violation. And then each of the following paragraphs kind of addresses that Section 3. And I understand where the NIA is looking at having more civility. But when you look at Section 3 and the mandates for each spectator, the one, for example, that could stand out to me would be subsection 3 that requires each spectator to behave in a manner that reflects favorably on the participating pupils, teams, and school community. And when I look at that, what if it's not reflected favorably that you have a parent or a spectator at the event cheering against the other team? There's a lot of like vague language here that's kind of a little overbroad. And so I just didn't understand what was kind of the thoughts behind this, like civility, I guess code of civility, and if there's violations that, for example, one section of the code would require the principal to write up a report within 24 hours when this occurs. And so I'm just kind of trying to understand this a little more, especially with Section 3. I thought I understood kind of the verbal abuse, but I kind of agree with my colleague how that could apply out to social media. But kind of looking at Section 3 and this like code of civil conduct, and if someone's violating it, all of the penalties that could resonate from that.
So your question, as I understand it, is with respect to Section 3 in Section 3 and how that would apply? Is that correct?
It is. I mean, it kind of goes through this. It looks like each of these requirements under Section 3 for a spectator. I just think subsection 3 stood out to be the easiest because it could be objective from a pupil on an opposite team to the spectator who's there cheering as not being favorable. And then we have all of these escalating events that would happen, including a report required by the principal or designee within 24 hours.
Right. And so I guess just to try to answer your question with respect to Section 3, which says that the spectator shall behave in a manner that reflects favorably on the participating pupils, teams, and school community. Again, that goes just to the general conduct of spectators at a game. I think it enhances some of the other items, the use of profane language and that sort of thing falls within this, threats of assault or battery, for instance, with respect to a spectator against an official or player or another coach or whatever. It's kind of falls within all those things. I don't think it's anything different than those, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. And I appreciate that, Mr. Anderson. And before I dive into each of these sections, like I do appreciate that Section 3 is more like a code of conduct, like something you would see hanging in a school, like, hey, let's be kind to each other, that kind of stuff. But when you're looking at Section 3 and the escalating penalties, I kind of agree with you when you're looking at like verbal abuse or assault battery, where you have escalating penalties, that makes sense. And they kind of do, in my mind, need to be separated. And so I don't want to keep going through this because I think Senator Daley and I both have similar concerns with the language in this bill, where I think it could be made better. And so with that, I'll kind of stop my line of questioning unless the chair needs me to make a motion.
Thank you. And at this time, we will go back up north to Assemblymember Hansen.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, if we want to go for the motion, that's fine. I appreciate my colleagues bringing up these concerns. I share those concerns, a little too ambiguous. And so just my questions were answered. So thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, Mr. Anderson, I think we will refrain from bringing this regulation up for a vote, and we will just defer this until our next Legislative Commission meeting and encourage you to work with the members on here on the sections in which they have concerns on. So thank you for being here, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Okay, members, that takes us on to our next regulation, which is R068-24. I believe we have Ms. Sausalamas here from the Department of Public Safety. Ms. Sousa Lamas? Okay, perfect. And I just had one quick question under this regulation. It comes on page 3 of the repealed section, and I just wanted to make sure I was reading this regulation correctly. And we're repealing the sections on page 3 because we are combining both the application and the renewal application into one application. And because this text is duplicated between both, we are repealing it on page 3. And if you could just confirm that for me on the record, that this language will still be included on the application of places where you cannot have a firearm, and we're just repealing it because it is duplicated.
Erica Souza Yamas for the record, ERICASOUZA-LLAMAS. Yes, we are repealing it because it is duplicative between the initial application and, the renewal. It is also duplicative. The location where firearms can be carried is also outlined in statute under NRS 202. So we felt it was duplicative to also have it in the NAC.
Thank you, Ms. Sousa Yamas. I appreciate that. Appreciate you being here just to confirm that on the record. That was actually the only question I have. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Members, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair?
Yes, Senator Titus?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I have a number of questions, if I might. First, some clarity I need, and on a personal note, I'm a CCW holder, so I've been through this process, and I just need some clarity on these new regulations. First, to renew the CCW that I've had now decades, the original course is an 8-hour course, and the renewal course is a 4-hour course. And I looked through all this. So is that going to, I couldn't see where that's changed at all. You're using the same forms. Can you give me some clarity on what the difference would be now on the renewal process?
Erica Souza Yamas for the record. I do have, I hope, a phone a friend on Zoom, Under Sheriff Leah Roscoe from the Churchill County Sheriff's Office to help me answer questions. I do not believe that this will change the requirements for the renewal versus the initial training. I do believe those are going to remain the same for the hours of training.
Is he there to clarify that? Are you sure of that? Do you know that? If the forms are the same, is it just 4-hour sheriff if you're on the line?
Yes, I am. Under Sheriff Leah Roscoe, Church County Sheriff's Office, OROZCO. Yes, this does not change anything in regards to that. It's just, I understand, just clarifying the language, the form will remain the same.
Great, thank you. And if I might ask another question, Madam Chair? So, Sheriff, as you probably know, my husband's been is a retired sheriff and was chair of Sheriffs in Chief, and it is the Sheriff in Chief's organization that still writes these regulations. Is that not correct?
We do the standards for training and instructor certification.
Correct. And in the new regulations,
the rest is by statute.
Great, thank you. And the new regulations on page 11, it mentions that demonstrates that applicant continued competency with a firearm through successful completion of a course prescribed by the sheriff. So that each sheriff, so potentially there could be 17 different trainings that the sheriffs choose?
Each sheriff has the lesson plan submitted to them, an instructor's bio, and they are responsible for making sure that it adheres to the standards and that each one is approved by a standard by sheriff. And once it's approved by a sheriff, it is considered to be approved by all sheriffs.
Correct. I just wanted a clarity to make sure that that we know that our concealed carry is recognized in multiple states, but not all states. I just want to make sure that our concealed carry issued in one county is recognized in all 17 counties.
It is, yes.
All right, thank you. Can I ask just a couple more, Madam Chair?
Yes, please continue, Senator Titus.
Thank you. And so on the question process, when the applicant is filing, and it's been a huge issue with our legalization of cannabis and owning firearms, and in my mind, not only as a physician but as a CCW holder, that it's always been brought forward that if you are on medical marijuana or not, if you are consuming marijuana, you cannot carry. So the question was, if they, and you're changing how the question is on have they ever used marijuana? Is that going to be, then what will be the result of that? So I think on question 15, it's on the application. Now this is on the application process, is whether you've ever used marijuana. And then if in the last year, I think it says, let me just be sure. It's question 15 on the application. Yes, and it's on page 9 apparently. So question 15, during the year immediately preceding the date of this application, have you consumed cannabis? And so then I'm wondering what the pathway is if there's a yes. What will that determine? Because now these are 5 years applicant. So the license is now good for 5 years. So in my mind, you could you could say, no, I haven't consumed in the last year, but then there's 5 years where potentially they could consume. So can you clarify that for me?
Yes, based off they have to be qualified to carry a firearm or to possess a firearm by federal standards. So with the marijuana still being illegal federally, if they say yes to that, or if they have a marijuana card, then they would be not eligible for a CCW. Obviously, if they do within that 4 years, we don't know about it. It's unless something comes to light, then that it would not affect it.
And thank you for that. Well, and this is my last question, and thank you for your tolerance, Madam Chair. So there is some concern that this language doesn't mirror, the cannabis specifically language, doesn't mirror what the federal language, application language is. Are you aware of that? Is there any clarity that you could offer me on that one? The concern is that it doesn't. Okay, maybe you might be able to clarify that it doesn't really mirror what the federal regulations are.
Yes, ma'am. Erica Suzy-Yamas for the record. We did add this question to be to ensure that we were also following the federal guidelines. So the federal guidelines are why we added question 15 to the Nevada application.
So it does follow the federal guidelines.
Yes,
All right,
ma'am.
thank you. And thank you for being here. And Sheriff, thank you for being online or on Zoom. And Madam Chair, thank you for your tolerance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Titus. And Senator Daly, I am going to do a check-in with you. Did you have any additional questions?
No, Madam Chair, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I would be looking for a motion to approve Regulation R068-24.
So moved.
I have a first by Senate Majority Leader Canizaro, a second by Speaker Yeager. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Our next, thank you for being here, Ms. Suisa-Yamas. Our next regulation that we have is R077-24, and I believe we have someone from the State Environmental Commission here. If Ms. Schumacher is available. Senate Majority Leader Canizaro, I believe this agenda item is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here with us. I have a few questions about this regulation. In here, as it pertains to the odor pieces that are being removed, the information that we received was that NDEP believes that the odor provisions are unenforceable and thus are asking for them to be removed. And I think that was an answer to one of the individuals who attended one of the public workshops and asked about why those provisions were being removed. And so can you talk to us about why you believe those provisions are unenforceable?
Great. Thank you for the question. Jeff Kinder, Jeffkinder. I'm a Deputy Administrator with NDEP. Thank you for the question. So a little bit of history on the odor part of the regs. Back in the 1980s, EPA conducted about a year-long study on odor regs and their enforceability under the Clean Air Act. And after about a year of researching it, they decided not to include odor regulations under the Clean Air Act as an enforceable mechanism. Instead, they decided defer it because it's subjective to local enforcement. So many states at that time removed them from their regulations as well. Nevada did not. But over the past nearly 2 decades, we've found this regulation to be ineffective. It requires a lot of work on our part. It also requires a lot of work on the facilities part and the community's part to try to establish some sort of standard that would be enforceable. So why we're bringing this forward today is we feel that under the Clean Air Act, if an odor results from a regulated air pollutant, we have plenty of authority under the Clean Air Act and those compliance tools to work with the facility to address an odor concern. If that doesn't work, we've also been successful working with the county, local code enforcement to come up with a solution. So this intermediate step that's currently in our regulations, we found to be ineffective, and that's why we're proposing to remove it. But we do still have tools available to work with the facility and a community to address an odor concern.
Okay, that is helpful as an explanation. How many violations of odor complaints have you processed?
Jennifer Schumacher, for the record. That's Jennifer Schumacher, Schumacher. In the past 15 years, we have processed no odor violations because it has been unenforceable, as Jeff Kinder had mentioned.
Okay, and I think part of your answer to that was that you believe that it would be enforceable under the Clean Air Act, and then also through regulation or oversight or working with, and I guess maybe you could clarify that piece of it, the local governments. And so have you spoken with local governments at all throughout the state to know what their capacity is to be able to enforce those? Do you have some sort of idea of a plan of how that would happen? Or is that just sort of the intention moving forward and the hope that you'll be able to kind of work that out?
Jeff Kinder again for the record. Thank you for the question. So just to clarify a little bit, we have not been able to bring forward any violations under the current odor regs. We have been able to bring violations forward when odor was a symptom of a regulated air pollutant. And for example, we had an asphalt processing facility that the local community had concerns with. They were able to put a control on that addressed their concerns as well as addressed any sort of Clean Air Act concerns. As far as working with the counties, we've been successful working with several counties on odor regs. We're always available to show up at various public meetings, provide tools, do inspections. Generally, when we have an odor concern at a local level, the county or the planning commission that entity can look at maybe having the facility locate somewhere else or have, not be able to approve, say, homes in certain areas. So that's how we've been able to work with the local jurisdictions. I'll go ahead and let Jen, we did reach out to each of the local entities, done about 1.5 years worth of stakeholder outreach just to make sure we're on page with local jurisdictions to make sure that what we're proposing today makes sense for everybody. But I can let Jennifer answer that question.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, we have reached out to the counties and twice previously the last couple years. We'd reached out with our small business environmental program, and also we reached out right before our public workshop to each county individually, and we did not receive any opposition to this. We did receive some support in removal of this regulation, and but the counties would continue to work with us, and as Jeff has mentioned, we would also investigate these odor complaints if we receive any as well.
Thank you. That is super helpful. And I think the way that I am then understanding it is these are being repealed because they're unenforceable as they exist in current regulatory form, but you still have the ability to enforce that as part of the Clean Air Act and then would work with local governments. They seem to be relatively on board, or at least have no objections to that as a mechanism to address any complaints that you may have. And I'm seeing you nod your head yes,
yes.
Which is great. I want to just make sure, thank you. I wanted to make sure that I was understanding what the process would look like with respect to that so that it doesn't feel as though we are sort of abandoning entirely the ability to regulate some of those odor issues that might come up in our communities throughout the state. So that gives me more comfortability with that. And then I had one final question with respect to the mercury pieces in here. Can you describe, because as I noted some of the answers to the questions during the public comment periods on these, we're moving them from one tier to another. And so can you just generally describe what the difference is between those two tiers? Tier 1 and tier 2.
Danilo Dragoni, for the record, Deputy Administrator with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Thank you for the question. My last name is spelled D-R-A-G-O-N-I. So when the mercury program was developed and implemented initially in Nevada, the tiers were created to basically accommodate kind of the existing facility and units. And basically what was planned was that as all the units already existing were going to be subject to the first tier, eventually all of them, they would have moved to tier 2, and I believe that would have been by 2006, 2008. So also, in addition to that, all the new facility and new units coming into the mercury program, they will be automatically accommodated into tier 2. So all the regulation that we are removing right now are related to tier 1, for which no facility and no emission units are existing anymore. And all the new facility and units coming into the program will be tier 2.
Okay, that is helpful, and I appreciate that. Madam Chair, that completes my questions on this, and unless there are other questions, I would be happy to make a motion to approve.
Committee members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, then I will take that as a first from Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro. Have a second from Speaker Yeager. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Members, that will take us to our second to the last regulation, and then we do still have to come back to R139-23, but up next we have R109-24. I believe I have Ms. Medina with the Board of Wildfire Commissioners here. Senator Daly, when our agency representative gets here, please feel free to ask your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions, maybe curiosity on my part. So you still get the paper tag and you can still fill it out and do it the way you normally do it now. So the electronic validation is voluntary. You don't have to do it.
Yes, thank you for the question. Matt Maples, M-A-T-T-M-A-P-L-E-S, Division Administrator, Department of Data and Technology, or Division of Data and Technology Services, Department of Wildlife. That is correct, Senator Daly. We'll have two options going forward with this regulation. Customers could select to continue using a paper tag, which is currently in place, or use an electronic tag, which would be provided through a smartphone application.
So you guys would have an app that they would have to download in order to use it and all that kind of stuff. There's no fee, I'm assuming, for that. But does it track the person at all and their location? How does it work? I mean, to me, you know, I'm technologically challenged, so I would never do it anyway. But I would just turn it off if I was out somewhere. And then how do you do the connectivity stuff? I mean, it seems to me you're going to be out in a lot of places where, hell, I have GPS go out on me when I'm driving around town, right?
All great questions, and thank you for those. All were points of discussion during various commission meetings and during public input. So I'll try to address those, and please forgive me if I forget to address a point and just remind me. To the first point, yes, the application, the smartphone application would be downloaded by the customer if they chose to or not. It's not required. It's provided free of charge. There's a development process that we would go through with our licensed vendor in order to develop that application. It's totally voluntary if you want to use the e-tag option or you continue to use paper tags. The point of discussion on the location services, one of the requirements in the application development is that the customer could select to turn off location sharing as part of the smartphone application so that we can satisfy that concern both through the commission and through members of the public, that the application could be tracking your whereabouts and where you choose to validate your tag based on the harvest of an animal. And so customers would have the opportunity to turn that off, and then location data would not be stored for that individual.
Okay. I mean, there's no way to address some of the connectivity issues. So it seems to me if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you don't have service, you just have to use the paper tag anyway.
Right, and I apologize for missing that last question. That was also discussed thoroughly during the commission meetings. A number of other states have created e-tags through smartphones, and one of the development criteria that other states have been successful with that we will also use is it will be required to work in the absence of cell phone service. And so most of Nevada, especially where we're hunting, does not have cell phone connectivity, and so the app would be downloaded prior. The validation code would be stored but not revealed to the client until the tag was punched, so to speak, or validated. And so that is a development requirement as part of the application development, that it would work outside of cell service.
So last question, is there an advantage to the Department of Wildlife or on the data collection side of it, quicker? Is there an advantage to doing it this way versus the paper method you've been using for a long time?
Yes, there's a number of advantages that we've identified. As part of the tag validation process, the customer would also be delivered their harvest questions at that point, and so our biologists would receive harvest data sooner than they typically would. It'll also reduce staff processing time. We have processes where customers can return tags, and then those tags can be issued through a first-come, first-served program awarded to an alternate. So customers would receive alternate tags or first-come, first-served tags more rapidly. So a benefit to the customer and also a benefit to the department, and then it would reduce the amount of staff time needed to process those tag returns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was all of my questions. When you're ready for a motion, I'd be happy to make one. I know there's other questions, so.
Okay, Senator Titus, it sounds like you have a question. Did you want to jump in?
Madam Chair, if I might ask a couple questions before a motion. So
yes, please proceed.
So thank you. So thank you for answering Senator Daly's questions. I have a couple in addition. I don't have a tag this year, so it's not a concern of mine, just so you know. But had I had one, I had some concerns regarding a couple things. I wanted to make sure, and you did answer this question already, that if you download the application and we're out there and we don't have cell service, as you already mentioned, that we would be able to fill out that tag right away, even without cell service, and then that would be saved to be uploaded when we did indeed have cell service. So that answered that question that I had. The other question I had is that then the further taxidermy and the meat processing, and making sure that that transition, whatever this process is with these electronic tags, would then be easy. It does mention in the regs about that there's going to be some component to that. But what if I am my cell world process, and I have Starlink, so I'm pretty much up everywhere, but and we butcher our own, those kind of things, but the taxidermy is a different thing. They don't have it. So I went ahead and did a electronic process. They don't do the electronic process. Is it something that I would download to be able to give the taxidermist that information? I mean, two separate potentials here where they need the paper copy.
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator Titus. For the meat processing, I'll try to address some of those concerns first and then come on to taxidermy secondly. Similar to when you would leave, a copy of your tag or something like that with the meat processor, you would leave the validation code.
The validation number?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
that's all they need. Okay.
Yep. And the same process would occur for the taxidermy process. And so you would provide that validation code to your taxidermist, and then that would be recorded as part of the receipt that the taxidermist provides back to you, along with information, information on the species and sex of the animal, client ID, describing characteristics, things of that nature.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited about it. Hopefully you can use salvage permits in the future on this application. So let's go. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Titus. Are there any other questions from any members in the North? Okay, seeing none, are there any questions from members down here in Las Vegas? Okay, seeing none, Senator Daly, I will go ahead and accept a motion.
Yes, motion to approve R109-24.
Thank you, and I have a second from Speaker Yeager. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Seeing none, motion carries. Okay, thank you, and thank you for being here to answer Senator Daly's questions. We will now head to R130-24. I believe our representatives from the State Environmental Commission are still here. If they would join us back at the witness table. And Senator Daly, when they are ready, please proceed with your questions.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. They're almost in place. So just a couple of questions, and when I read the statement for the need of the regulation, it just seems to me there's a little inconsistency in the statement. It says the proposed language to exchanges adds clarity and consistency to current practices and allows for soil and groundwater action levels to be updated concurrently with federal standards without further revisions to these regulations. But then when I read section 1, it says that you're adopting the levels as they exist when you turn this in. So if the federal regulations changed after that, I'm just not seeing the consistency there on the current concurrency. Not that that's a problem. The federal government may do something foolish that we don't like and would be below the standards we would want to keep in our state, et cetera, et cetera. And I know a lot of times when those changes are made, you guys review them to see if they're appropriate for the state of Nevada and various things, especially when we adopt updated regulations or from the feds, et cetera. So will it automatically match what the feds do, or is it going to be locked in at when this regulation is approved and submitted?
Jeff Kinder, again for the record, Jeff-Kinder, Deputy Administrator with NDEP. Thank you, Senator, for the question. You're correct. We don't prospectively adopt anything by reference. So when we do adoption, it is at that point in time. If things would change in the future, we'd go back through a regulatory process. We would review the changes, go back through the regulatory process to, again, be current.
Understood. And we can be out of compliance. We just can't be lower than what the feds say. We can have a higher standard or whatever. If the feds change something to say, hey, we're going to change the lead level to 3 times what it is now, we can say, no, we don't think that's appropriate for the state of Nevada, and still have a higher standard. We just can't have it be 5 times if the feds say it can only be 3. Is that correct?
Jeff Kinder, again for the record. Yes, that is correct. We can be no less stringent than the federal law. So when the federal law becomes more stringent than state law, it creates a regulatory gap for whatever time period it takes us to review and adopt that standard.
So are we satisfied currently with the levels that we're going to be adopting through their reference? You guys have reviewed them and nothing, because things are changing fast at the federal level. We used to be able to count on vaccines and stuff, but we can't anymore from the feds.
Jeff Kinder, again for the record, yes, we are comfortable with the current standards and the cleanup work that we're doing. But we will, of course, review any new changes at the federal level as they come down.
Yeah, I just wanted to get clarity, as you guys said, it would create clarity on what seemed to be an inconsistent statement in the need for the regulation. But those were my only questions, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that that the federal levels are in alignment with what we believe it should be is appropriate for the state of Nevada, and that regardless of what the feds do, we would only have to update if they improved the standard to catch up. So that's the only questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daly. Are there any questions from other members up in Carson City? Okay, members, any questions down here? Okay, seeing none, Senator Daly, would you like to make a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve R130-24.
And I have a second from Speaker Yeager. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, now we will come back to our first regulation. I believe we have both representatives now from the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. So we will come back to R139-23. Ms. Lindlow, I believe we have you back on the line as well as with your colleagues. So Senator Daly, when you see them pop on the screen, please go ahead and proceed with your questions.
Thank you, Madam.
Ms. Lindlow, do we have you? Perfect. Thank you. Senator Daly.
Daly, Madam Chair, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties or perhaps user error, but my apologies for the delay.
No worries. I think we were on the question on section 4, sub 1D regarding the public assistance. So that's to contain a certification that the obligee, that he or she is not currently receiving, and you're striking out public assistance and has not applied for public assistance, and you change that is not receiving cash assistance through temporary assistance for needy families. So to me, it was broader, the language that you're deleting, and more narrow, the language that you're replacing it with. So they could have some public assistance and still meet this. And I just wanted to be clear that that was the case. And then if you think it'll be helpful to people.
The reason that it was changed from the broader public assistance to TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, is due to the fact that the child support program only pursues child support with state debt when there is the TANF program. We do not pursue child support when it is just the food stamps, SNAP, or the Medicaid program. So it's specific to the TANF.
So they would be eligible to receive those other benefits and not have any impact on this.
Correct.
Okay. And then I know you said this is just on when you're reconciling between the two. And thank you for that clarification for me. I wasn't picking up on that part of it. But in section 9, seems to me that there's two calculations. There's the how much does the obligee owe based on income and all of the formulas you use, but then there's also a basic needs calculation. How do those differ, and what happens if the obligation, the income level says, hey, the obligation is lower than the basic needs? What happens then? Or does that ever happen? Maybe it never happens.
So if the Angeles, are you on the line? I'm going to see if my colleague here.
I am here. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Angeles, Washington. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. So yes, what it does, it establishes a base, which we see in section 1, which tells us what the base is. And so pretty much the obligation, it has to meet the minimum requirements per the federal regulations. So we wouldn't establish a child support obligation that doesn't meet the minimum qualification. That answers your question.
Right. So there's two calculations. You have a basic needs calculation that you say is the minimum federal obligation for child support. But then you have an income calculation that's done on what the obligee would owe based on what he makes. What if his obligation based on that formula would be less than the basic needs. In other words, there's only so much you can afford. You can't get blood out of a turnip, and so on. So if they're not making enough to meet that basic needs, and there's two different calculations, which one trumps the other, and what happens when there's not enough for the basic needs?
So we do have Angelise Washington for the record. We do have a requirements in there where we can only, if we have an obligor in a situation where he can't meet the base needs. So it's his income, and then it's also childcare. We added childcare, the needs for medical expenses, and then any other adjustments that seem fit. So if he's unable to meet all of the categories, then the court does have the ability to deviate from the guidelines if the obligor does not have the means to meet all of the base obligations.
Okay, so it's basically just going to go to a family court judge, and or whichever judge you go to, and he's going to decide. The last question, if I can, Madam Chair, is in Section 11, Sub 1, regarding, and I think it's existing language, if a person's in high school still. How do you guys interpret that? I've heard conflicting, stories, I guess, on how that's interpreted. I've heard people say, now it doesn't matter that they dropped out of high school when they were 16 and they haven't been attending and they're not enrolled. I still have to pay till they're 19 because they could graduate from high school. How is that interpreted and enforced? Is it 18 or is it 19, regardless?
So it is the emancipation, Angelise Washington for the record. The emancipation is when the child reaches 18 years of age, or if the child is still in high school. So if the child is 18 and they're still enrolled in high school, that child support obligation is still there until the child graduates from high school.
Understood, and that's where you said if they're enrolled, and I've, like I said, anecdotal heard stories that we owe the obligation until they're 18. They turned 18. They were not in high school. They dropped out when they were 16, and they were said, well, you still have to pay till they're 19 because they're not graduated from high school yet. And how do you guys interpret that? Do they have to actually be in high school, enrolled, have classes, been attending? So is it 18 or is it until they graduate from high school, or 19? How do you guys interpret that?
Angelise Washington for the record. It is 18. 18 is the emancipation. We go past 18 if we can verify that the child is still enrolled in school past their 18th birthday.
So
we do verify. Go ahead. Sorry.
It said so they do have to be enrolled, and you guys make some effort to do that. To verify.
Correct.
That.
Yes, we do verify. Yes, we do.
Very good. Those are my only questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Daly. And Ms. Washington, if we could get you to just please spell your first and last name for the record.
Yes, I apologize. Angelise Washington, Angelise, Washington, Washington.
Thank you so much for being here and helping answer the questions. Is there any other questions from members in Carson City? Are there any other questions from members in Las Vegas? Okay, seeing none, Senator Daly, would you like to make a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move to approve R139-23.
Thank you, Senator Daly. I have a first from Senator Daly, a second from Speaker Yeager. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you so much. I believe that completes our consideration of all regulations under agenda item number 5. We will now move forward with agenda item number 6, which is legislative audits. We have our legislative auditor, Mr. Dan Crossman in Carson City, to present the audits. Mr. Crossman, would you like to proceed with the summary of the audit reports? Please join us at the witness table.
Good afternoon, Chair Howdigi, Vice Chair Speaker Yeager, and members of the Legislative Commission. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. Under Agenda Item 6, you'll see a letter from Senator Don Loop, Chair of the Audit Subcommittee, indicating that on January 16th of 2025, a meeting of the Audit Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission was held in which 5 reports were presented and accepted by the Audit Subcommittee. Following the January meeting, all legislators were notified of the release of these reports via email with links to the reports on our website. During that Audit Subcommittee meeting, we presented a summary of the key findings in the audits to the subcommittee, answered questions of the committee members, and engaged in some robust discussions. Representatives from the agencies also provided remarks and answered various questions. Today, I will just briefly summarize the key findings from those reports. Please note that the full reports are available on our website, where many more details can be obtained regarding our findings and the specific recommendations that we made to the agencies. Additionally, if any of the members of the committee are interested in discussing any of these reports in more detail, we'd be happy to find a time to do that with you. We're also available during the interim to present to any of the committees as desired. So turning to the next page in the packet under Agenda Item 6, is a summary of the audit of the Department of Administration's State Public Works Division, project identification, cost estimation, and reporting. Our audit's objective was to determine whether the division had adequate controls to identify, complete, and report on construction projects. We identified certain opportunities could be pursued to reallocate unused funds from completed projects to others more timely. Furthermore, the division can expand its use of an alternative budgeting method to more agencies to improve more timely completion of maintenance projects. The division can also enhance its use of its facility condition assessment report to benefit the CIP, or Capital Improvement Program, development. Specifically, project managers often did not coordinate with the facilities group or use the FCA reports to assist with identifying CIP needs. We also noted certain information reported biennially to the legislature by the division on the costs of recommended maintenance for state buildings had some inaccuracies. Specifically, the report included tens of millions of dollars in costs for projects already completed and included outdated cost information. Finally, we found the division does have an effective process for estimating project costs, but needs to improve its processes for retaining documentation used in the development of cost estimates for projects included in the CIP. We made 5 recommendations in this report, which the division accepted. On the next page is the summary for the audit of the Nevada Department of Transportation, stockroom purchases, material stockpile management, and mechanic productivity. The purpose of this audit was to determine whether NDOT has effective controls over stockroom purchases, equipment repair, workshop work, and material stockpiles. We also evaluated the appropriateness of the use of state resources in certain areas. We found that NDOT continues to experience problems developing and implementing controls to safeguard assets and deter or detect fraud. Specifically, we observed purchasing controls designed to ensure the proper approval and accounting for vehicle and equipment parts were often circumvented and not effective. In many cases, appropriate purchasing approvals and proper segregation of duties were not documented. Purchasing documentation signatures were often illegible and contained fictitious names, and some purchases were made before proper authorization had occurred. In addition, NDOT has weak controls over material stockpiles and related data, and the recording and tracking of equipment and car parts can improve. Although we did not identify fraud during our audit work, given NDOT's history of some fraudulent incidents, strong controls are needed in these areas as millions of dollars in parts and materials are purchased every year. Low productivity rates at some equipment repair shops highlighted procedural inefficiencies. Specifically, we observed significant variations in productivity between equipment repair shops, with low productivity reported for several. For example, an analysis found mechanics at one location recorded only an average of 2 hours per day working on NDOT vehicles. Furthermore, we observed the inappropriate use of state resources as unnecessary modifications were made to a vehicle, and another vehicle was driven almost exclusively for personal use. Low productivity and improper use of state resources resulted in waste and increases costs to the state. In addition, fleet costs will increase if vehicle repairs or routine maintenance is not performed timely. We made 10 recommendations to NDOT in this report, and all of these recommendations were accepted. On the next page is a summary for the audit of the Department of Administration, Mail Services Division. The purpose of this audit was to determine whether the division's controls protect against improper transactions, including fraud, and ensure accurate billing of agencies for mail services. In the report, we noted a common theme in our testing areas that the division frequently did not maintain adequate documentation, which limited some of the conclusions we could draw. We found the division's lack of controls for certain mail processes increased the risk that fraud and waste have occurred or will occur in the future. Although we did not specifically identify instances of fraud, we were unable to conclude that it did not occur because of limitations to available information and documentation. A lack of controls led to suspicious metering transactions, unsecured metered envelopes, uncontrolled and inaccurate refunds, and unknown parties accessing division funds. In addition, the division did not perform background checks for individuals with access to sensitive information. With some metered transactions worth tens of thousands of dollars, and with the division paying millions of dollars in metered postage every year, the opportunity to defraud the state is significant. We also found that the division did not have a sufficient process to ensure it accurately billed customer agencies. System errors caused the division to over and underbill customer agencies for the services they provided them. Unusually large and suspicious transactions and remote meters also created additional billing inaccuracies. Furthermore, insufficient review of billings led to the division underbilling for certain production work they did. This also created waste because the division had to absorb some of those costs as a loss. Inadequately trained staff and a lack of formalized policies and procedures contributed to these billing issues. Ensuring billings are accurate and adequately supported is essential to safeguarding state resources. We made 15 recommendations to reduce the risk of improper transactions and improve the process of billing for this division's services. The division did accept all 15 recommendations. Turning to the next page is a summary for the audit of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Nevada Division of Forestry, Forest Fire Suppression Budget Account. The purpose of this audit was to evaluate the impact of the division's billing, collection, and payment practices related to the Forest Fire Suppression Budget Account. This audit was required by Senate Bill 480 from the 2023 legislative session. We found a lack of proper oversight resulted in the Division of Forestry requesting more supplemental funding than was necessary, as more than $32 million in fully reimbursable out-of-state costs for fire incidents had not been billed for reimbursement. When NDF fails to seek reimbursement from other states and the federal government, money due to the state is not collected, and supplemental funding then must be requested from the legislature. Additionally, accounts receivable amounts were not adequately recorded, which impacts the state's financial statements. Increased oversight of the fire suppression accounting functions will help ensure appropriate funding and help improve state budgeting decisions. Improvements are also needed over accounting and budgeting for NDF's emergency fire expenditures. Budgeting processes resulted in the commingling of Nevada's in-state costs with costs incurred associated with Nevada resources assisting with out-of-state fires. Furthermore, the budgeting formula also commingled these costs. Lastly, NDF did not sufficiently review Wildland Fire Protection Program cooperator and other state agency invoices to detect billing errors. Additionally, NDF's data on fire incidents was inaccurate and frequently incomplete. Error-free invoicing and data are necessary to ensure the accurate accounting of fire costs. to help ensure Nevada is fully reimbursed for its costs to fight fires in out-of-state jurisdictions, and making sure that it only pays its share of cost-share fire expenditures. We made 13 recommendations to ensure forest fire suppression expenditures are tracked, reimbursed timely, budgeting practices improve, and cooperator payments are accurate. All recommendations were accepted by the agency. The legislature also took certain steps during session to enhance accountability of NDS fire suppression costs through revisions to the budgeting process. On the next page is the summary of our review of governmental and private facilities for children inspections dated December 2024. This year's report included the results of 36 children's facilities we inspected. We had notable findings at 7 of these facilities. In each of these, we identified certain health, safety, and/or welfare issues and contacted the respective licensing agencies to share our concerns. We also identified some additional concerns related to fire safety, denial of rights reporting, reporting requirements, and fingerprint submission requirements at many of the reviewed facilities that warranted additional attention as well. As a result of our reviews and based on the licensing agency's actions, various forms of corrective actions were taken for the facilities and homes to ensure standards of care are being met. Through our continued work in this area, we will monitor and follow up with facilities and their licensing agencies where we've had concerns. There are many more details in this report, which I will not go into today, but identify deficiencies we noted at the various facilities. And that report is available on our website. This report also included a few recommendations for legislative consideration to formalize complaint reporting requirements, enhance training requirements, and to require certain child abuse and neglect staff screening checks at certain facility types in statutes. During this session, Assemblymember Anderson championed a bill, Assembly Bill 521, which was sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services, that enhanced the statutory requirements associated with investigations of the history of abuse and neglect associated with certain medical facilities and organizations to protect children. This was in response to our report and identification of a need for enhanced statutory requirements to protect children. This bill passed unanimously in both houses and was signed by the governor. As I previously mentioned, we are available anytime to dig into these reports and additional detail. These agency reports, the first 4, are required to submit a 60-day plan of corrective action, which was due on April 14th of 2025. And all of those reports have been received. The 6-month report on the implementation status of recommendations is due on October 14th of this year. These 6-month reports, which are prepared by the Governor's Finance Office, Division of Internal Audit, as well as our assessment of the implementation status after we receive that 6-month report, will be presented at a later date to the Audit Subcommittee and then to the Legislative Commission. This concludes my summary of the audit reports that were accepted by the Audit Subcommittee on January 16th, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman, for the reports. Committee members, commission members, any questions for Mr. Crossman?
Madam Chair?
I don't see any here in Las Vegas. Let's go ahead and move up north.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Assemblymember Hansen?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Crossman. I have some concerns for sure. But regarding the governmental and private facilities for children's inspections, I'm assuming they've got I didn't see it noted, but I think on the other audits, they have that 60-day plan for corrective action would be one question. And in particular, under your general concerns, 6 facilities related to fingerprint submission documentation. I just had some questions about not understanding why. Does that mean they didn't have fingerprints on people that are working there? And would that fall within, if it's a 60-day corrective recommendation, that we would hope to have that by then?
Thank you, Assemblymember Hansen. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. In regard to your first question on the 60-day plan, This report is not considered a full-blown audit, if you will. These are inspections of these facilities and are not subject to the same statutory requirement to have a 60-day plan of corrective action. Our role in the review of children's facilities is to come in after the licensing agencies have maybe done their work, and then we report back to the licensing agencies and request that they do follow up on these. Now, while we don't have a formal follow-up process, we do continue to have contact with these entities. Each year we do a risk assessment to identify which facilities we will go into that year, and often it may be a repeat facility that we were just in the prior year or maybe the year before to follow up on that status. Additionally, behind the scenes, there's a lot of conversations that go on between my staff that specialize in this area. They are child welfare specialists that work on a routine and regular basis with the state and Clark County and Washoe County to follow up on the status of these agencies and the improvements that maybe they're making. But to your original question, I don't have a formal process for that follow-up. And then to your second question regarding the background checks, I don't know the exact answer to those ones that we have highlighted here. In some cases, it may be a lack of a background check. In other cases, it may be a lack of documentation that they perform those background checks. I will go back and look at the details of that, and I can get that information to you.
Thank you, Chair. A quick follow-up, if I could.
Yes, Assembly Member.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Crossman. So I'm going to be Pollyanna here. I'm saying there's not a statutory requirement for a 60-day, so maybe that is because you maybe address it sooner because you're having conversations or the licensing agencies have been alerted to it and maybe can get to it quicker?
For the record, Dan Crossman, it very well may be earlier than 60 days. Just really depends on the next opportunity we have to make contact with them. It depends on the severity of the issues we noted there. Often it depends on the licensing agencies and their attention to it as well. So there's not a defined timeline for that.
Thank you, and just for the record, thank you for that, and thank you for these audits. They are always very instructive, and certainly major concerns that if the fingerprints haven't been done, I can understand maybe they don't have the documentation available, but if they've not been done, that we have people not being screened properly that are working with children, and then also one of the facilities incorrectly administering medications. So hopefully our agencies are listening. They're knowing that my hair's on fire and that hopefully it's going to be taken care of soon. So thank you, Mr. Crossman, for your oversight.
Thank you. Members, any other questions from Carson City?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Titus here. Actually, just a comment. I just want to acknowledge the hard work that Mr. Crossman and his team have done. When I sat on that committee and heard these particular 4 reports, I was actually appalled in what we were hearing, and to hear that the particular agencies, they improved and listened, and I just want to acknowledge the importance of these audits, and thank you for the good work that you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Okay, seeing none, I will echo the sentiments of Senator Titus. Thank you so much for the work of you and your division, Mr. Crossman. Members, this is not an action item, but I'm happy to accept the reports on behalf of the Legislative Commission Subcommittee on Audits. And thank you, Mr. Crossman, again, for being here and presenting the audits and for the work that you do. Members, we will now move on to item number 7, which is the appointment of members to committees and similar entities. We have Deputy Director, Mr. Roger Wilkerson, here to assist us with the appointment of the members to the various committees. Mr. Wilkinson, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roger Wilkerson, Deputy Director, for the record. In your packet, you'll see recommended appointments for 2 bodies this afternoon: the Commission on Minority Affairs and the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum. I'm happy to provide further information if you wish, but in the interest of time, I'll leave that to your discretion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Members, you do have a copy of the appointments for both the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs And I believe the members to the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum, do you have any questions for Mr. Wilkerson? We can start down here in Las Vegas. Seeing none, are there any questions in Carson City for Mr. Wilkerson? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and take a motion on them one at a time. Do I have a motion to appoint the members as listed to the Commission on Minority Affairs? I have a first by Speaker Yeager, a second by the Senate Majority Leader. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Seeing none, motion carries. Next, we will move on to accept the appointments to the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum. I'd be looking for a motion. Have a first by Speaker Yeager, a second by the Senate Majority Leader. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or nay? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Wilkerson, for being here and walking us through agenda item number 7. With that, members, I would like to note that I will be rolling agenda item number 8 till our next Legislative Commission meeting. I did have one member reach out to me requesting more time to review the amendments to the rules and policies. So that will be rolled to our next meeting, which is scheduled to be held in August. So please take that time to read through those changes, amendments. With that, we will move to agenda item number 9, our second to the last item. And we have our General Counsel, Mr. Kevin Powers, here, who will provide us with a report regarding litigation. Mr. Powers, when you're ready, please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal Division. I have 3 cases to report on today. I will move quickly through them. The first case is Lombardo versus Nevada Commission on Ethics. That's currently pending in the Nevada Supreme Court. In the underlying action, the Ethics Commission entered an opinion concluding that Governor Lombardo, while serving as a local public officer, violated certain provisions of the ethics law in NRS Chapter 281A. Governor Lombardo then petitioned for judicial review in the First Judicial District Court in Carson City. As part of the petition for judicial review, the Lombardo attorneys argued that certain provisions of the ethics law were unconstitutional, in particular arguing that the statutory provision allowing the Legislative Commission to appoint 4 members of the Ethics Commission violated separation of powers. Because the petition in the district court was challenging the constitutionality of the legislative enactments and appointments, the LCB intervened in the case in order to protect the constitutionality of the legislature's actions. During the original district court proceedings, there was a jurisdictional issue as to whether the Lombardo attorneys had properly served the Attorney General with notice of the complaint. The district court agreed that there was improper service and dismissed the action. The Lombardo attorneys appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court. On June 18th, 2025, the Nevada Supreme Court entered an order agreeing with the Lombardo attorneys that there was good cause to not serve the Attorney General in this matter, and therefore that service was not necessary to invoke the jurisdiction of the district court. As a result, the Nevada Supreme Court remanded the case to the district court. And now with the parties back in the district court, the parties will address the merits of the constitutional and statutory issues. I want to emphasize the Legislative Council Bureau is involved in this case only to defend the constitutionality of the legislative enactments and appointments under the ethics law. The Legislative Council Bureau will not be arguing with regard to the merits of the actual ethics violations found against Governor Lombardo when he was a local public officer. Again, we'll be focusing only on defending the legislature's the constitutionality of the legislature's actions. The next case to report on is the Elko County case that I've reported on in several prior meetings. It is Elko County versus the state of Nevada. It was in the First Judicial District Court. It has now moved to the Nevada Supreme Court. In this case, Elko County is challenging the constitutionality of Sections 2 and Sections 8 of AB 519 of the 2023 legislative session. That required the Board of County Commissioners of Elko County to impose a local property tax of a rate not less than 1 cent and not more than 25 cents to fund capital projects for county school districts within Elko County, including capital projects for schools located on qualified tribal land. In February, the district court entered an order and found that sections 2 and 8 of AV 519 were unconstitutional, that they violated Article 4, sections 21 and 25 of the Nevada Constitution as invalid local and special laws. The court severed those provisions, sections 2 and 8, from the legislation, and the rest of the legislation remains constitutional. Keep in mind, the rest of the legislation includes the appropriation from the 2023 legislative session of $65 million to the Elko County School District in order to perform construction on a new school in the Duck Valley Indian Reservation to replace the existing deteriorating Oahe School. So that appropriation was not struck down, it remains in place, but sections 2 and 8 were declared invalid. As authorized by the chair of the Legislative Commission, the LCB filed a notice of appeal on behalf of the legislature. That appeal is now pending in the Nevada Supreme Court, and we will argue that sections 2 and 8 are not invalid special and local laws, and that the legislature properly enacted those laws as proper legislation. The last case to report on is the new case. It is Rybar versus State of Nevada and the Legislative Counsel Bureau. This case involves a challenge to the Nevada Lobbying Disclosure and Regulation Act and NRS Chapter 218H and Joint Standing Rule number 25 that deals with media credentialing during the legislative session. Under those provisions, the Lobbying Act and Joint Standing Rule number 25, a person who's a registered lobbyist, whether paid or unpaid, cannot also be granted media credentials by the Senate and Assembly to be granted media access to the floor of each house. The purpose of the rule is to ensure that lobbyists are not on the floor of each house with the media. This rule was modeled after rules in the U.S. Congress and most other state legislatures, and no rules like this have ever been struck down. However, Mr. Rybar is the plaintiff. He has challenged the constitutionality of those provisions of the Lobbying Act and the Joint Standing Rule number 25. He filed that case in February in the United States District Court for the District of Nevada. In March, the Legislative Counsel Bureau filed a motion to dismiss the original complaint. In response, Mr. Rybar filed a motion to amend his complaint. The district court, under the liberal amendment standards, granted him his motion. Mr. Rybar filed a first amended complaint on June 26th of 2025. The LCB filed a motion to dismiss the first amended complaint. That motion is currently pending for the U.S. District Court. That is the 3 pending cases, Madam Chair. I'm certainly open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Members, this is not an action item, but if you do have questions for Mr. Powers, now is the time. Do we have any questions in Las Vegas? Okay, seeing none, are there any questions for Mr. Powers in Carson City? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Powers, for being here and for your update on the 3 cases. Members, that takes us to our last agenda item number 10, public comment. This is our second period of public comment. We will be accepting public comment at this time from people here in the Las Vegas office building, and then we will be moving to Carson City, and then last to our phone lines. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. If there are any people in our Las Vegas audience who would like to give public comment, please approach the witness table. Okay, seeing none, are there any people in the audience wishing to give public comment in Carson City?
Madam Chair.
Okay, seeing none.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes.
I would like to comment under public comment when, as a member of the public, when this is the appropriate time. It's not generic to anything specifically on the agenda, however.
Okay, Senator Hansen, if it is okay with you, I would like to go to members of the public first, and then we will come back to you last to end public comment.
That would be fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, seeing no one in Carson City, AVH, can we please check the telephone line for anyone wishing to give public comment?
Thank you, Chair. The line is open and working. We have no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Hansen, I believe you said you wanted to give public comment in your public capacity as a Nevadan. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, congratulations on being selected as the chair of the committee. This is a little bit of a follow-up on what Senator Titus had mentioned. The last 30 minutes of the session is something I felt I wanted to address. This is my first opportunity with fellow members of the legislature. What happened in the Senate really unfortunately tainted an otherwise really, I thought, a very excellent session when the President Pro Tem, the last minutes, took the stand, and the Lieutenant Governor, and he may not have been locked out, but I stood there and witnessed him trying to get into the building, into the chamber, and saw the Sergeant at Arms blocking him from entering the chamber. That is when I moved for a point of order, and the parliamentarian asked the President Pro Tem to step down and brought in the Lieutenant Governor. Problem with that is the Lieutenant Governor never brought us out of recess. The rules are very clear in Masons. An unqualified motion to recess, which is what we were in, when adopted and announced, places the House at recess until called to order by the presiding officer. We never came out of recess. We never had the presiding officer, Lieutenant Governor, do that. That's issue one. Next, Senate concurrent resolution number 8 was brought up. Immediately, rather than giving all of us an opportunity to debate, they called for the question. The right to debate, though, is something that cannot be denied to us. It is a fundamental rule of parliamentary procedure governing all legislative bodies that the opportunity to debate and, if possible, convince their fellow members is the right of the minority, of which they cannot be deprived by the will of the majority. That was an absolute abuse of calling for the question. It should never have been allowed. So that's another disgraceful ending to an otherwise pretty good session. Next, after the vote, without any debate, I called for a motion for reconsideration. What happens when you call for a motion for reconsideration? Again, the rules. The effect of making a motion to reconsider is to suspend all action on the subject of the motion until the reconsideration is acted upon. Instead, that was passed to the Assembly without even an opportunity for any of us to have a discussion on it. And it was a violation of our own rules. And last, I've heard
Thank you, Senator Hansen. I appreciate you giving public comment, but because I want to make sure that I am equitable throughout this interim, I will be keeping public comment to 2 minutes, just like I would for any other member of the public. So thank you so much for your testimony. Senator Hansen, I would encourage you to send anything else in writing like I would to any other member of the public. So thank you.
I would gladly.
Is there anyone else who would like to give public comment?
On LCB? I understand that you guys have been asking, and by this, not public comment, and this is Senator to fellow members of the Legislative Commission. My understanding is that there has been pressure put on the Legislative Council Bureau to try to make midnight Pacific Standard Time not mean the current one because we had daylight savings times. In fact, the Nevada Constitution is perfectly clear. It says very clearly, Article 4, Section 2, for the purposes of this section, midnight Pacific time must be determined based on the actual measure of time that, on the final calendar day of the session, is being used and observed by the general population as the uniform time for the portion of Nevada which lies within the Pacific time zone or any legal successor to the Pacific time zone, and which includes the seat of government of this state as designated by Section 1 of Article 15 of this Constitution. The legislature and its members, officers, and employees shall not employ any device, pretense, or fiction that adjusts, evades, or ignores this measure of time for the purpose of extending the duration of the session. So I'm a little bit embarrassed that you in the majority party are putting pressure on the Legislative Council Bureau to now pretend that 1 a.m. instead of 12 p.m. is the correct time to have sine die. We're violating, once again, the Constitution, and I hope that Mr. Powers being here and the rest of the legal staff of LCB does not succumb to this pressure, but in fact follows the clear, unmistakable verbiage in the Nevada Constitution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Senator Hansen. As a member of the majority party, I can tell you with confidence that that has not been the case of the majority party pressuring our legal counsel. Thank you for your comments. Members of the commission, any other comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I appreciate being elected chair of Legislative Commission. I look forward to working with you all. Please be on the lookout for a poll coming to select an August date for our next meeting. Seeing no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.